Ohayou gozaimasu. Good morning. It is an honor to be invited to speak at the Future Design Conference. And as a way of introduction, please allow me to say a few words about the Center for Impact Investing. Just moving to the next slide. The center is actually established by Temasek Trust in strategic partnership with Temasek, as well as ABC Impact. And ABC Impact is an Asia-focused, impact-only PE fund. At the center, our mission is to advance and accelerate the adoption of impact investing practices by companies as well as investors. We believe that this intentional approach to doing business is important and will contribute to solving the complex global challenges that we're facing today. Now, while the recovery from the COVID pandemic is underway, it has left its mark. The financing gap to meet the UN SDG standards has actually increased. The OECD estimates that this gap has actually increased by 56% since the pandemic. Income inequality has also grown, and supply chains remain under strain. Food security is also a concern, especially when you consider climate volatility, as well as geopolitical issues. However, there are some bright spots. During the pandemic, there were many examples of cross-sector, private-public cooperation. Consumer demand for sustainability and value-linked products also rose. And there was interest in impact investing, and that accelerated through the pandemic. Now, when it comes to impact investing, the understanding of actually what constitutes impact investing actually can range quite widely. I'd like to share a frame that we use to define the spectrum of approaches and strategies pursued by a number of investors and companies as they move through their transition journey. So moving to the next slide. This chart is actually illustrating from an investor's perspective, showing the continuum of capital. So when you move from the left to the right, the left-hand side shows traditional investing, which is very profit-focused and only profit-focused. On the right-hand side is the other extreme, where you have philanthropic donations who are only focus on the outcomes to the environment and to the community. And when you move from the left to the right, you see the shift from responsible investor to where you become aligned to the ESG regulations to an impact investor. And impact investing is when companies look with a very intentional approach to deploying capital. They are looking to generate market returns while solving environmental and social problems. And as you move further right, then you see a more concessional rate of capital and rate of returns as expected, and a heavier focus on impact generation. Moving to the next slide, please. So when you talk about companies, the same frame is used, again, from the left to the right. On the left-hand side, you see traditional businesses, which are very profit-focused and which have limited or no regard for ESG practices. On the right-hand side, you see charities or non-profit entities, which are not profit-focused at all and only concerned about environmental and social good. Now, as you shift from the left to the right, you see that same shift in strategy, where companies can go from engaging in very basic corporate and social responsibility activities to going to ESG-aligned businesses and practices to becoming an impact business. And what does that mean? And when really you talk about impact business, this is when your strategy is very much aligned to addressing environmental and social good. It might actually be the opportunity is linked to that, and your businesses are actually linked to the growth. So what I would like to emphasize on this point is that companies are not static. Companies can adopt and create a transition pathway from the more traditional businesses to an approach which is more holistic, considering business opportunities alongside environmental and social good. And these new pathways can be very specific. They can be limited to a specific business unit, or they can be designed specifically to address the opportunities in the new impact economy. Moving to the next slide. And the impact opportunities are actually large. The addressable market is estimated to be in the trillions. New business models and technologies are needed for energy transition, climate adaptation, new materials, and healthcare. The population of unserved and underserved consumers is large. For Southeast Asia alone, it is estimated there are 350 million underserved consumers just for financial services. So the market opportunities are significant. Moving to the next slide. Despite all these opportunities, there is significant need and gaps. Most of the assets under management remain in the hands of high-income economies, and the amount allocated to fill the sustainable and impactful opportunities in emerging economies remains very, very low. Next slide. The good news is that the impact investing approach is gaining steam. More mainstream investors, many of the names here, I'm sure that the audience is familiar with, they are launching very large impact funds, and these are in the billions of dollars, targeted at addressing the market opportunities I just spoke about. Next slide. When you have the Global Impact Investing Network, they estimate that the total impact investing assets under management is now about $1 trillion. And this is only considering fund managers where they have already existing processes and governance in place, and they measure the outcomes of that impact. When you expand that to funds which actually have an intended impact, but do not actually have the measurement framework in place, the amount of assets under management then expands to about $2 trillion. And while substantial, these monies are still only a fraction of the global financial assets under management. Next slide. Now in 2020, the GIN actually conducted the annual survey of impact investors. And this slide shows the range of returns that these investors received for the various asset classes that they invest in. And I'd like to emphasize here that the majority of these investors, 2/3, do not have to trade off market returns for impact. They're able to do both, generate commercial rates of returns alongside environmental and or social good. Now moving to the next slide and taking a little closer look at Asia. So Asia has 50% of the world's population. There's close to 1 billion youth. And interestingly, more than 70% of them are eager to be part of the green economy. And there are many opportunities and needs and white spaces, ranging from you have over 350 smallholder farmers in Asia. They need support to thrive and to grow, especially with increasing climate volatility. Quality healthcare is much needed, both in terms of cost as well as access. And much needs to be done when it comes to waste management and recycling. And while there are complexities, including the huge geographical variation, the disparate government regulations, the good news is that there is a widespread recognition of the need for a just and inclusive transition. And then when it comes to asset allocation, when just looking at the amount of funds allocated to Asia by impact investors, it's still rather low. So when GIN did the survey of over 200 billion asset managers, the amount of assets allocated to Asia remains at just 14%. And as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, the amount of funds and the number of funds which are actually headquartered in Asia remains very small. This is very underweight, especially when you consider the size of the Asian economy and our population. Moving to the next slide. Now, to help attract capital to the region at SIP, we're very happy to partner with the UNDP SDG Impact team. And it has been a pleasure to support their work in building investor maps for ASEAN. And these maps are designed to highlight areas where there are opportunities, where you can have financial returns, as well as making environmental or social good, and where country policies are supportive. In ASEAN, maps have already been completed for 5 economies. These are Indonesia, Thailand, Cambodia, Malaysia, and Vietnam. And this slide gives an overview of the various opportunities that are available in Asia. Moving to the next slide. When you talk about insights and the opportunities that are available, this slide summarizes the breadth of opportunities and sectors with impact opportunities. And you can see that it ranges from food and beverage to healthcare to financial services. And I also like to point out the importance of technology in many of these highlighted sectors. And this is critical in order to enable access as well as scale across the region. These SDG investor maps are published online as a public good. I do hope that they will be of use to the audience, and I invite you to please go to the website. They're available on the UNDP SDG Impact website, as well as the CIIP website for your reference. Now, in conclusion, I do hope that I was able to give you an insight to the vast opportunity to achieve impact in Asia. I would also like to emphasize the need for systemic and continuous measurement of outcomes to ensure that impact is more accountable and to avoid impact washing. This measurement should apply to not only the positive outcomes, but also the negative ones. And it should apply through the entire investment life cycle of the company or the project that you're investing in. And lastly, there needs to be a robust ecosystem and strong partnerships are required between companies, investors, and public institutions to address the complex problems that we're facing today. Last but not least, alongside the SDG maps, the Center has also published its own research reports. We have one on financial inclusion outcomes, and we have published a number of case studies on Asian companies and Asian funds on their own impact journey. I do hope that this helps to inspire companies as well as investors to start on their own journey. These are all available on our website, and please do feel free to reach out for further conversations. Thank you so much.